2 years ago, Mrs. Izebuwa Kwale retired from active service at the Amadu Bello Teaching Hospital, Zaria. And today, she is a pensioner. Her story is different from the many ones we hear about who have given many years of meritorious service to their various organizations but have been unable to access their pensions. This was because of the implementation of the Pension Reform Act by the government, which had given Mrs. Kwale and many others like her a future to look forward to in retirement.
I've worked in ABU for almost 30 years. I was the laboratory head. I was actually afraid because they will tell you, it takes time, and you will not, you know what it is not to earn salary. But it didn't actually take time. My pension managers were IBTC. So getting to 6 months, they will tell you to start processing. The processing took probably maybe, let's say 2 months or maybe about 2-3 months. They paid me everything that I was due.
20 years ago, right, specifically before 2004, right, there was no contributory pension scheme. There was none in Nigeria. Did we participate, when you look at those who put it together to put, Pension Reform Act 2004 in place? The answer is yes. So as we speak today now, the pension industry in Nigeria, go and check. Even though it has a long way to go, there is still a lot of room for improvement. We are talking about subscribers of about 12 million, but most of the salary earners in Nigeria, they are in the pension industry, right? And a lot of headroom for growth, but the important thing is that that industry represents the largest domestic institutional investors that we've got in Nigeria.
To understand the true origins of the Pension Reform Act, we need to go as far back as 1965 to an idea which came from one man, the late Chief Ernest Shonekan, who decided that private sector participation in policy reforms was the gateway to true economic rebirth and restoration. For Chief Ernest Shonekan, inspired by his participation as a private sector representative in the 1965 international conference that focused on frameworks and modalities for a thriving private sector, the first seeds of a similar summit for Nigeria's economy were sown. With the contributions from 2 other fellow erudite leaders of thought, who together would later become the founding members, they formed a think tank group in the 1990s which made recommendations to the then military government of General Ibrahim Babangida on policy direction for the nation. And thus, the Nigerian Economic Summit was born, founded in 1993 and held on the 18th and 20th of February that year. It was later incorporated in 1996.
NESG was a child of circumstance. Circumstance in the sense that we had a military regime. The style of management is a unitary, from top down. And at that particular point in time, both the private sector and the public sector all believed in the public management of economic affairs.
And so by the early 1990s, we were dealing with almost complete state capture by military rule. Nigeria was also short out of many global cooperation frameworks, so we were isolated as a state. And the economy was closed. It was in that context that a group of concerned business professionals and industry leaders got together and started to discuss a need to engage the government of the day on the future of the economy.
We used to have a Tuesday or a Thursday evening dinner. They used to rotate around our homes, and that's how it started. And then to discuss issues and developments, and gradually from there we identified deficit in policy making in the country, and so we thought, well, why don't we formalize this into some kind of organization, not for profit, of course.
all of us had more or less known each other. So we were actually locked into the same kind of ethos and values in terms of what we saw as the most important things that actually matter to society and matter to this country. Second, we also had a broad view, I think a fairly good understanding of where the world is and where it was headed and what Nigeria's place should be in that world.
We talk about the experiences in the early days. It was more around really being able to communicate. There was a perceptible distance, I call it distance, between the private sector and the public sector. On a lighter note, in those days, we used to talk about the arrogance of the private sector and the ignorance of the public sector. But really, that didn't quite make for the kind of level of engagement that we saw. Because it was also military, the military was not quite geared up for that kind of dialogue. The military was about making decrees.
The position of the NHG has always been constant. We just wanted a free market economy, just one in which we just allow people to thrive and try to see governance as building a very solid, sound institution that's designed to make the economy to thrive, not to compete with the economy, but just to create the famous enabling environment, as we all say.
This period in Nigeria's economic history was labeled the infancy or closed economy phase. This era laid foundation for the far-reaching legislative and regulatory change in education, stabilization, privatization, deregulation, infrastructurization, and democratization. In the ensuing years that followed, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, NESG, pursued vigorously an agenda of rapid industrialization through job creation and population control, anchored on peace, stability, and an educated population through the now adopted yearly Nigerian Economic Summit, whose recommendations were presented to the successive governments for implementation. The summit served as the consensus-building platform for economic visioning and the discipline of analytics-based policy planning.
The economic, the first one came really to set an agenda that will bring Nigeria out of the economic quagmire it was in and seek to improve the lives of Nigerians. So much so that really the report of that summit was tagged Economic Action Agenda. And in it were strategies to get the country out.
The idea of that first summit was just to dialogue, was just to create the basis by which the public and the private sector will use the economic evidence, the data, as the basis for economic policy decision making. So that was the purpose of the summit. That summit then established 6 principles for the design of the future trajectory of Nigeria's economy to be open, to be more competitive, to be more sustainable, to be more inclusive.
The summit itself, I thought, was quite successful. It had in attendance all the leading private sector players, all. I couldn't think of any leading private sector player at the time who wasn't there. It also had in attendance all of the leading public sector officials and then heads of public sector agencies, a few military officers, So it was a good summit. People came into the summit x-raying the Nigerian economy, where the Nigerian economy was at that point in time, and what was needed to catalyze the Nigerian economy into the 21st century and to move the Nigerian economy into a first world economy and all the things that needed to be done.
Initially, there was a lot of hesitancy. And the president came up and said he would want this to continue on an annual basis. Unfortunately, the following year it didn't hold. That was 1994, because there has been a pattern change in government. To have the second Economic Summit was a little bit tricky, but we managed to overcome, thank God, in 1995.
We started to follow up with specific workshops on specific topics. So if you had a set of 6 recommendations, say, at the end of the summit, on each one of those 6, we'll then follow up with an in-depth session, further exploring each one of those recommendations with a view to making them more and more workable. Eventually, we got into all the privatization work. And again, you know, to then say, okay, you cannot just start privatizing without setting the rules. We don't have competition law. At that time, we didn't have competition law. We didn't have antitrust thing. So we had to start that process again. Eventually, after about maybe like 4 years or 3 years thereabout, we got around to say, yeah, okay, let's do it.
The Green Book, which is the report of the annual summit, when it's published, we also take this and make sure that we distribute to the various ministry to ensure that they have more details of those recommendations. And this is the intention that this will help MDA to implement those recommendations.
As technology, economic growth, multiculturalism, globalization, and IT began to advance across the world, and nations began to consolidate economic and political power, the NESG realized that Nigeria could not afford to be left behind. And so, on the 30th of September 1997, Nigeria's Vision 2010 Committee, chaired by the former head of the nation's interim government, Chief Ernest Shonekan, presented its report to the then head of state, General Sani Abacha.
The NESG pioneered the concept of visioning. And back in 95, within our first 3 years, I think we had Vision 2010.
We had done a phenomenal amount of work with the government of the day back in 1996 to develop the Vision 2010 document.
I agree that Vision 2010 document is an important one that was so elaborately crafted. And then subsequently there was an economic action plan. If we had done, even if it were 50%, 30%, this country would have experienced monumental strides socio-economically and particularly in terms of infrastructure development. But we didn't.
It's important to stress that the NESG is an advocacy group. We're not government. People think we are government because our name is Nigerian Economic Summit Group. No, we are not government. We're a private sector-led think tank. And so ultimately, the agency, the authority, the power to execute policy change is in government.
Now, are we where we should be? No. Have we made progress, significant progress? Because honestly, if you know where we started from versus where we are now, you can see the progress we've made. The only disappointment, like I said, is that the progress is not measured to the effort at making the progress happen.
During this phase, the Nigerian Economic Summit, NES, made notable impact by establishing global benchmarking discipline as the premise for national economic scorecard measurements, reviews, and assessments. This was part of the efforts to set the agenda for the modern Nigerian economy. This era, the early opening up phase of the economy, heralded commercialization, liberalization, and privatization policy reforms.
In 1999, we now had President Obasanjo in office. So between 1999 and 2007, the opening up of the economy began. You know, the early stages of the opening up, and was accelerated by, of course, a willingness of the Obasanjo government to do some tough reforms.
See, NESG's, I mean, should I say the philosophy or the concept we adopted universally also influenced subsequent regulations and legislation. But it did so in a manner that was almost difficult to discern. I mean, I give an example. There are several laws that came out, Pension Reform Act, central bank autonomy. Some of the principles that governed these statutes were laid down, at least in discussions of past economic summits.
Deregulation, opening up our country, and bringing a more understanding between the public and private sector became the hallmark. And most of the institutions you see today, EFCC, ICPC, Nigerian regulatory due process offices, these things, most of them were instituted because of our recommendation. If you go back,
the NESG has always had a strong focus, on banking and financial services, and the banks and financial services operators have always been very involved in the annual summit and in engaging in various policy forums.
I don't think you ever met the era of give me your tally number. You don't even know what it means. Oh my God. When people are saying they are queuing in banks now, I just smile because we used to queue and spend 6 hours. That was banking of those days. And a lot of those banks were government owned. National Bank and all. Only Wema Bank survived. All the other banks, government owned, gone.
Go and check the balance sheets of Nigerian banks 30 years ago and compare it to now. It's incredible. It's a quantum leap. You understand? If I check that of Stanbic IBTC, I'm talking over a period of 20 years. 2003, we are talking about deposit liabilities for us. We will have celebrated 7 billion. 2023, 20 years later, we are talking about something in excess of trillions, 2 trillions. That is massive. Now again, banks have been able to get listed. They've been able to go on the exchange. If we check the market capitalization of the top 5, 6, or 7 banks, right, in Nigeria, very, very significant. And the banking industry itself is now fully digitized, highly automated, extensive branch networks, and the banking industry is also playing significant roles outside of the country.
I will still remember the days of Nitel and Karen of ladder to pursue them to come to your house and all that. Or, your neighbor's phone is faulty, they will come and fix it, then yours is affected. So I know that is one sector that people feel the impact.
You have to go and queue at Nitel if you want to make international calls. Now you can do from the convenience of your home, anywhere. That's opening up. So that private-public partnership enabled it because we forced governments to privatize Nitel, and a new telephony system emerged that is world compliant.
We also have the PIA, the Petroleum Industry Act. Took a long time, it took decades, to come into force, and obviously part of the advocacy that NESG did, has led to that. Now NNPC has been privatized, there are a lot of reforms happening in the sector, although we still have more reforms that need to be done, but at least it's a starting point.
When the 10th Nigerian Economic Summit opened with the theme, Partnering for Growth and Transformation, the National Economic Empowerment and Development Strategy, NEEDS, and the State Economic Empowerment and Development Strategy, SEED's, agenda was advocated as Nigeria's homegrown poverty reduction strategy and was based on 3 pillars. 1. Empowering people and improving social service delivery. 2. Fostering economic growth. 3. Enhancing the effectiveness and efficiency of government.
You see, when we started democracy, at the beginning, with President Obasanjo, what he did was working with Governor Soludo. They did a NEEDS program. The NEEDS program was bottom-up, local government, states, everybody. It was supposed to be a policy developmental document that we are going to try.
NEED stands for National Economic Empowerment Development Strategy. So if you have a vision, you must have a strategy. And if you have a strategy, what's the strategy about? What we are focusing on is economic development. economic empowerment. So if you have it at national level and the state is doing something different, you will never get the result you want. So we started cascading it into the states. So some of the states started their own economic summits. I remember the Lagos State one. There was one in, I think, Abuja and some other states as well. So, and as they have, they invite NESG, come and help us with it. NESG carries the agenda from a national level to the state level.
The Nigerian Economic Summit drove reform legislations in key reforming sectors like power sector, with the National Electric Power Authority, NEPA, renamed Power Holding Company of Nigeria, PHCN, and broken up into 18 companies that involve the private sector in the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity. 2. The creation of the Ministry of Communication Technology. 3. The strategic concession, commercialization, and privatization of Nigeria's seaports, amongst other sector reforms. Vision 2020, birthed in 2007, and the 13th Nigerian Economic Summit, sought to further place the people at the center of socio-economic progress by focusing on making efficient use of the nation's natural resources to achieve rapid economic growth and alleviate poverty and societal ills.
You know, we have done Vision 2010. Then, because of the transition of the president, there was a discontinuation. So it was when, in 2010, when Mr. Jonathan was now in office, that focus on rebutting the vision and creating a longer-term vision for 2020 got greater attraction.
We may say that, okay, we have not done it very well, but it's better to have something than nothing. It was under the auspices of the partnership of Nigeria Economic Summit Group with the government. We had the Vision 2020. The whole idea was to position Nigeria to become one of the top 20 economies by the year 2020. And so we sat down, bringing both private sector, public sector, partnered with the government to at least have a vision that will unite subnational and national and all government and private sector, public sector, everybody trying our best to ensure we become one of the top 20 economies by the year 2020.
And I can tell you that by 2020, we had come to I think 21 or 22. We are quite close, which if we had maintained our trajectory, it may be in 2021 we could have readily become that number.
I say to myself that if we are going to craft another vision document, we don't need, which is another lesson, we don't need to be any more elaborate. We have been extremely elaborate, but we now know that we are in an innovative, global, competitive world. It is no longer information or technology. It is now innovative competition. What that requires, social infrastructure, particularly education, health. It requires technology.
And of course, as many citizens know, we supported, as the Vision 2020 ended in 2020, we supported the government in creating a new Vision 2050 agenda and a medium-term development plan 2021 to 2025. So NESG has played an important role in catalyzing the ideas that inform our agenda, and by holding a scorecard up to show where we are.
Armed with a clear roadmap for Vision 2020, a monitoring and measurement mechanism, and the scorecard for the nation's progress, the 2010 16th National Economic Summit was the time to confront the engine that would drive the wheel of the nation's progress towards 2020. After 50 years of nationhood, it was time to confront the question of leadership.
So the focus was we needed to create a way of recruiting leadership that was visionary, educated, well-cultured, that had character, competence, and capacity. So our recommendations then were to ensure that elections, first of all, where leadership recruitment starts, need to be free and fair. 2, that there has to be sufficient participation of citizenship or citizens so that they can make valid choice. Thirdly, the political parties and political systems need to be more rigorous in leadership selection and also ensure there's internal democracy, which helps to get in the proper leadership.
Don't forget, each time I talk about the presidency, we still got all our state governors that we have to deal with, and that's another area that we really got to do a lot more. I think in recent years, to give credit to the current CEO, we really touched base with the House, the Senate and the House, and I think we've done very well there. And we've actually got a lot of their respect. I think the contributions we've made with NASPA and all that has made it, has really accentuated the role of the NESG.
We also created what we call the Governance Forum, where we brought the state governors to the party. The essence being this, yes, Nigeria, we know the federal government is in Abuja, but the bulk of our populace are actually in the states, right? That's where the population is. And so whatever the policies we're talking about in healthcare and education, in infrastructure, in economy, whatever, unless these things made sense in states, unless it impacted the lives of our people in the states and the local governments, those things were meaningless. And so we needed to bring the governors to the party.
Now the Secretariat has expanded to be able to now support several roundtables. A roundtable that focuses on the National Assembly, a roundtable that focuses on State Houses of Assembly, SABA, an intervention that focuses on the judiciary, and these programs have now been housed in a center that is named after our founding father, Enoshonekon. It's called the Enoshonekon Center, or the Enoshonekon Center for Legislative Reform and Economic Development, and it basically oversees legislative, regulatory, and judicial reforms that are needed to create an open, globally competitive Nigerian economy.
As Vision 2020 gained momentum, Nigeria's slide into recession in 2016 revitalized the NESG's efforts towards ensuring a viably competitive economy through inclusive growth by looking inwards to homegrown sustainable solutions, which was covered under the theme of that year's summit tagged Made in Nigeria. The Economic Recovery and Growth Plan was the outcome of that summit's deliberations.
The Made in Nigeria initiative was indeed a part of the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, because the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan was focused on making us look inwards to try and see how we can build on our strengths, how we can get more productive. Indeed, the president kept on saying that we must consume what we grow and grow what we consume. So that was that initiative. And at the very first summit, we decided jointly with the NESG and the government to make that the theme. We invited many companies to come and showcase their products, and we tried to link buyers and producers and encourage people. It was very encouraging.
So the thinking that led to us sponsoring that was we figured there were small Nigerian companies that were trying to make a breakthrough in ideas that matter and could benefit not just from being given the podium to showcase their work, but also receiving the gift, which was a cash injection into the business. And one of the businesses that participated in that has gone on to be a major player in the health tech industry today. At that time, it was called One Medical. It's one of the fairly successful health tech companies today.
The last three finalists of the 2019 Nigerian Economic Summit Startup Pitching Event. Loystar.
The NESG startup competition was a remarkable experience for us at Loystar. Apart from the fact that we were winners, the organization of the entire program was very commendable, from the bootcamp sessions to the office hours You could tell that the program was very well thought through. The time spent engaging with the various partners at the NESG competition was totally worth it. Through the program, we gained access to valuable resources and benefits, such as legal services from one of the top legal firms in the nation, and we also received financial support, which is good.
The Made in Nigeria Summit that actually discussed how we as Nigerians can begin to buy what we produce and produce what we eat, what we drink. And that has also impacted very positively. In fact, many MSMEs began to get government patronage. It opens up more market for us, and that to us is a very big one. It has helped many MSMEs to grow and upscale from that time till now. And if you look at the statistics of the growth of MSMEs, you discover that our numbers has increased from that 2013 to now. As of today, we have about 40 million captured data of MSME playing in the space, and that's to us a big one.
The 2011 summit stimulated the most comprehensive, cost-based, and investment-focused sector master plans in Nigeria's history. The NESG noted that given the key sector plans, private sector investments across all sectors had to grow between $35 billion to $40 billion per annum. By 2013, Nigeria was one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And after the rebasing of the economy in 2014, it was confirmed as Africa's largest economy. Nigeria became Africa's largest recipient of foreign direct investment.
People are sitting in Nigeria Investment Promotion Council today, which was conceived as a one-stop shop for investors in Nigeria. That was not only the NESG proposal or recommendation. The NESG actually set up the committee that drafted the legislation, and I was a member of that committee, what you have as today's Nigeria Investment Promotion Act. It's verbatim, a draft from NESG.
When we advocated with the government, look, let's make our economy investor friendly. Let's make sure that we organize ourselves in a way and manner that we can attract investors. Look at it. FDIs grew from $1 billion in 1999 to over $5 billion in 2007. So just calculate that within about the space of 8 to 9 years, there was a huge increase in foreign direct investment because NESG kept on advocating and partnering with government.
Since inception, succeeding CEOs of First Bank have been board members of NESG. In fact, First Bank spearheaded NESG's leadership of the private sector to galvanize efforts during the only World Economic Forum Africa ever hosted by Nigeria in Abuja in 2014.
We moved to agriculture, which is both a business and a vocation, and has great impact on the economy, and up to today is the largest employer of labor. So the question is, how do we make our agriculture productive, economically rewarding, and attractive, both to capital and to young people?
There are quite a number of positive impacts that NESG through the NES each year annually has been able to impact on, particularly those of us in the MSME ecosystem. And it's been awesome. I can place my hand on many. Let me just mention one or two. The first is that has to do with agriculture. There was a summit that was actually dwelling on how to diversify agriculture, to move from oil to non-oil. And it was discussed extensively at that summit. And thereafter, after the summit, the Ministry of Agriculture then took it upon themselves to work with the recommendations that came from that summit. And that helps to liberalize the agricultural system. Thereafter, we had a lot of made in Nigeria rice coming up, competing very well with the imported ones. And as of today, you discover that many Nigerians now are falling in love with made in Nigeria rice. Not just rice, many other products, agricultural products like that, not just crops also in the different value chain of agriculture. And that has, to me, been a very big impact on the MSME.
The race for global relevance among daunting economic and social challenges was heating up. Hence, keeping Nigeria competitive in the years to come was a clarion call at the 25th NES, where it was stressed that rapid industrialization, transformational education, optimal demography, and most especially sustainable peace and security were crucial indices for progress as the 2050 threshold approached.
Why the year 2050? I'm aware that there's a global agenda by the UN, which is 2030. I'm also aware of the AU Agenda 2063. Now, but for us in Nigeria, everybody said that by the year 2050, we're going to be the third most populous nation in the world. Now, whether this is a blessing or a curse is dependent on what we do with it. So we at the NESG and the board felt that why don't you begin to then anchor that and start planning and setting a framework around that. How do you do rapid industrialization? Because it's about job creation. How do you create the workforce, the populace that is educated and is healthy?
Nigeria needed to understand that education, because standard of education are beginning to fall, the private sector was beginning to complain that we're not getting the right skills, we're not getting the right people. So the country needed to tweak its educational focus.
What I consider the single most successful intervention of the NESG in the last couple of years is a triple helix conversation with the Nigerian Universities Commission that has led to a lot of improvement in the policies, including the transnational educational policy, as well as the registration of the first set of open universities with incredible outcome. I think that education being at the center of all of the reforms that we need, conversation that led to those sort of reforms through policies and happen in a very reasonable period of time, I think that will be one of my biggest victory. I mean, I was on the sideline of it, but I was quite happy to have participated in it, and I found myself now sitting on the board of trustees of one or two of the institutions that came out of those conversations.
One thing again we have introduced that makes me proud is that in-house we've established what we call the NESG Academy. The NESG Academy is our own platform to building people for public-private engagement. We've successfully worked on the curriculum for the various levels. This we intend to open to a number of our young people so that they are well prepared in engaging government, so they're well prepared in doing whatever job they want to do. And to actually start a fellowship, it's called a Bridge Fellowship for the NESG, where we'll bring in people, about 10 to 40 of them for a period of 18 months, and properly tutor and school them and give them the opportunity to intern at government space so that this baby called NESG that was set up by our founding fathers can be passed on to a younger generation that will do something marvelous out of it.
The 29th Economic Summit, tagged Pathways to Sustainable Economic Transformation and Inclusion, was held from October 23rd to 24th, 2023 at the Transcorp Hilton Hotel, Abuja, and like other summits before it, continued to ensure that evidence-based economic policy analysis and diagnostics charted a clear roadmap towards national growth and development. Driven by the work of its policy commissions, engagement platforms, credible research and dissemination analytics, and high-level collaborative mechanics, the summit has succeeded in positively influencing the direction of economic and social policies towards the growth of a modern, globally competitive Nigerian economy. The summit has succeeded in positively influencing the direction of economic and social policies towards the growth of a modern, globally competitive Nigerian economy, with the common citizen as ultimate beneficiaries of these reforms.
If you look at PBEC, it's actually a presidential council that was established in the year 2016, specifically with a dual mandate. The mandate number one is to make sure that somehow we simplify processes. The second mandate is to then make the business environment attractive, what you call doing business, to improve the reality of its simplicity and to improve the perception so that more and more investments can be attracted into the Nigerian economy.
So the relationship between NESG and PEBEC goes back a long way since inception of the council, because the council works on reforms across all arms and levels of government. We've partnered with the NESG on different interventions. For instance, we've partnered on our subnational interventions. We have a lot of engagements. NESG has a subcommittee that deals with subnational issues. I've spoken on panels a couple of times, and we have a lot of knowledge sharing. But particularly, we've worked on our Omnibus Bill together for almost 5 years. That's the Ease of Doing Business, the Business Facilitation Act, the first of its kind in the country. So NESG was a knowledge partner that had a committee dedicated to working on the contributions from the private sector. So that collaboration has gone on for a number of years now. We work primarily on small and medium-sized enterprises, but our new interventions covers large corporates. We have the PEBEC Business Champions, 23 platinum members that gross over $1 billion in the economy. We have a collaboration with the World Bank with $750 million on the table for a 3-year program to deepen ease of doing business reforms. We also work with the judiciary and the legislature. So with the judiciary, we have the small claims courts. Over 30 states have implemented small claims courts, self-representation, liquidated damages for businesses to have access, quick access to justice. With legislation, we continue to work with the National Assembly, now the 10th National Assembly, on pivotal and critical legislation such as the CAMA, the Business Facilitation Act 2022, and other such landmark interventions.
And on Summit 22, through a partnership between the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, the National Assembly, and the MBA section on business law, initially supported by DFID UK Enable program, and then later by the African Capital Alliance Foundation, NASBA, National Assembly Enabling Business Environment Roundtable, was created to support driving 115 legislations that were hindrances to doing businesses in Nigeria.
One of the most recent is this policy on tax. Yes, it's a key fiscal policy for us in MSME space. The most recent of it is the tax holiday, withholding tax holidays that is being granted to MSMEs and farmers. And that for us is also a big one, because these are some of the agitations that we have been shouting about over the years and now made possible by NESG.
So some of the laws that come to mind that I know that NESG was part of the advocacy and the capacity building process is CAMA, the Companies and Allied Matters Act, that brought in lots of reforms in the corporate commercial landscape of the country, be it the way you register companies, even now you have one person as a director, a shareholder, major reforms that have been made to modernize our corporate governance processes in Nigeria.
Then we come to the area of consumer protection. I think that the new bigger body, i.e. the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission Act, is much more effective than the old Consumer Protection Council. You can see them moving from place to place, ensure that the common man benefits from the reform of the economy.
If you look at what has happened over time, for instance, Lagos State, which is the maybe center of commerce in Nigeria, or the capital of commerce in Nigeria, if you see the judicial process has been strongly strengthened and improved upon. The judicial officers are carefully selected. The Federal High Court too has been strengthened. It's not exactly where we want it to be, but there's an improvement. Alternative dispute resolution mechanisms have been put in place. Arbitration also has been strengthened, and we have strong arbitration processes and proceedings, nearly as good as anywhere else in the world. So it's not exactly where we want it to be, but it's much better.
And then we also have the Copyright Act. As someone who is a lawyer and an IP policy expert, it's really good to know that some of these reforms that were pushed for have materialized into the Copyright Act. So yes, NESG has done an amazing job over the years.
It is safe to say that the NESG over the last 30 years has been actively involved in Nigeria's nation-building process and in its journey towards becoming a prosperous economy. However, this effort could not have been achieved if the organization had not taken steps towards becoming an administratively feasible, financially sustainable, and operationally efficient organization. To make the NESG work as one functional, cohesive unit, hundreds of passionate members, volunteers, partners, and collaborators committed to the Nigerian project joined the train and added their wealth of unique skill sets and knowledge to the think tank. They are convinced that a patriotic zeal to collaborate and explore ideas would take the nation out of its current situation and is the only way to accelerate positive change and ensure a sustainable future for every man, woman, and child in Nigeria.
So we play 4 roles: watchdog, dialogue partner, intervener, and connector. So we have served as dialogue partner, like I said, longest unbroken public-private dialogue mechanism at a national level on the economy, sustained every year without fail, with the exception of 1 year from 1993 to date. We also have another center, Policy Innovation Center, which warehouses all our behavioral and social science research, focused on making sure that economic and social inclusion, the inclusion in our mission, happens. Beyond the annual summits, which people call our annual talk shop, we have workshops through our policy commissions, 12 policy commissions, and over 50 policy thematic working groups, communities of practice, and roundtables that implement the summit recommendations between summit. And we've done that and sustained that for almost 2 decades. Lastly, we have the connector role, where we continuously connect government and business and civil society, academia and media across multiple sectors of the economy. And we have our intervener role. Sometimes our recommendations require we go and collaborate with other national actors to get stuff done. And we've done this across many spheres and ways. And that has been significant in driving some of the transformation that we have seen. So through these centers, 12 policy commissions, almost 50 policy thematic working group, and 3 communities of practice, a community of practice on youth, a community of practice on MSME, and a community of practice on gender. We drive the vision and the mission of the NESG, created in 1996, to implement this tangible reforms.
The NESG is a good place to work, a good place to learn, and also the fact that you kind of have access to this wide network of experts, both public, private, civil society, who are vast in their different subject areas. And you leverage that relationship for driving all the solutions that, that are proposed.
I've been around. I joined mid-year 2003 in the middle of the delivery of Next 10. Was when I joined NESG, and for me it has been a wonderful experience all these years. So working in NESG has been fun, and this is for 2 reasons. One, all the principals, the bosses, the DGs or the CEO that had come and gone, I honestly will say that I enjoyed working with each and every one of them, drawing lessons and experiences from each one of them. But ultimately, my colleagues actually are the real motivators. When you have, young people around you that are ever willing to give you a listening ear, as it were, that's friendly working atmosphere created by each of these principles that I mentioned is what keeps one, going.
I congratulate all the staff for all the hard work they've put in. Oftentimes not well celebrated, oftentimes looked down by people, and sometimes they scream at us as not done. But I think a good job has been done. I know where we started, I know where we are now, and I have no doubt in my mind that the future is bright.
So, is there progress? There is. Can there be more? Yes. Should we be dissatisfied? Yes. But not at the risk of discounting what we had. Remember where you are coming from. You are making progress, maybe not as fast, but to make it faster, you and I need to engage with governments.
So I commend the Economic Summit Group. They should keep up the good work. Nigeria development is a long-term process. And there will be ups and downs. I know sometimes people can get easily discouraged. They shouldn't get discouraged. There will be ups and downs, but ultimately, working together, engagement, exchanging information, providing support will get us there.
Things may not be right this time, but so many hands are on deck to change the narrative. Very soon, we will enjoy Nigeria, we will enjoy the business climate here, and we'll be better for it.
The vision of the NESG stays the same. The priorities, whilst they shift to focus on the crisis, the policy crisis of our time, are driven fundamentally by these big changes. And so it's a pleasure to celebrate the 30th anniversary as we go on this journey from here onward into the future.
As it marks its 30th year anniversary, the Nigerian Economic Summit will continue to push the boundaries of impact-driven, evidence-based policy reforms and implementation across all the sectors, establishing clear reform priorities for the Nigerian economy. And with the help of dedicated, patriotic, private and public sector professionals, its vision of becoming Africa's leading private sector think tank, committed to the development of a modern, globally competitive and inclusive Nigerian economy, is beginning to align with the desires of every Nigerian for a better, fulfilling, productive and prosperous life now and in the future.